Todo mundo fala do que entra do Paraguai pro Brasil, mas ninguém conta o que o Brasil anda pra lá. Todo tipo de crime.
Assaltante de banco no Brasil sempre foi o topo do crime. Estamos falando da união de...
The crime drama world often thrives on stories that blur the line between truth and fiction, and few series capture that tension as effectively as Criminal Code. Set against the complex and dangerous borderlands between Brazil and Paraguay, the series dives deep into the hidden war between law enforcement and organized crime. At its core, the story revolves around an elite group of federal police officers who are tasked with dismantling one of the most sophisticated bank robbery operations ever uncovered in the region. Inspired by real criminal investigations, the narrative explores how modern forensic science, especially DNA analysis, has transformed the way authorities hunt down criminals who once believed themselves untouchable. The result is a gritty, high-stakes crime saga that blends investigative realism with pulse-pounding action, creating a narrative that feels both cinematic and disturbingly plausible. From the very beginning, the world of the story feels tense and unpredictable. The border between Brazil and Paraguay is portrayed not simply as a geographic location, but as a symbolic frontier where law, power, and desperation collide. This region is known for intense smuggling activity, hidden criminal networks, and a constant flow of illegal goods and money. Within this volatile environment, the series introduces viewers to federal police investigators who understand that every mistake can cost lives. Their mission is straightforward in theory, but enormously complicated in reality. Track down the masterminds behind a massive bank robbery network that has managed to outmaneuver law enforcement for years. What makes the criminals so dangerous is not just their brutality, but their level of organization. They plan with military precision, coordinate across borders, and leave almost no trace behind. The central tension of the story emerges from the realization that traditional investigative methods are no longer enough. Criminal organizations have evolved using advanced technology, encrypted communication, and complex logistical networks to stay ahead of authorities. Yet the police are evolving as well. The investigators begin to rely heavily on forensic science, especially DNA analysis, which becomes one of the most powerful tools in their arsenal. A tiny fragment of biological material left behind at a crime scene can open the door to an entire web of connections. In the world of this story, something as small as a hair strand or a drop of blood can unravel an operation involving dozens of criminals. This scientific element gives the series a unique investigative rhythm, showing that modern crime fighting often depends as much on laboratories and data analysis as it does on dramatic raids and interrogations. The narrative gains emotional weight through the performances of its main cast. Leading the ensemble is Romulo Braga, whose portrayal of a determined federal officer captures the internal conflict of someone living on the front line of a dangerous profession. His character embodies the relentless pursuit of justice, but also reveals the psychological cost of such work. Long nights, constant surveillance, and the knowledge that every operation could turn violent weigh heavily on him. Opposite him is Maeve Jenkins, who brings intensity and intelligence to her role as another key investigator within the federal police. Her character represents the analytical backbone of the investigation, someone who understands that solving complex crimes requires patience, logic, and the ability to read patterns hidden beneath layers of deception. Together, these characters create a partnership that balances instinct with scientific reasoning. Another powerful presence within the story comes from Tomás Aquino, whose performance adds depth to the dramatic landscape of the series. His character exists within the moral gray zones that often define crime dramas. Whether operating inside law enforcement circles or interacting with the criminal underworld, he brings a sense of unpredictability that keeps viewers constantly questioning loyalties and motives. The dynamic between these characters forms the emotional engine of the story. Each investigator brings a different perspective on justice, risk, and responsibility, and those differences often shape the strategies used to confront the criminal network they are chasing. Behind the camera, the creative vision guiding the series belongs to Heitor Dalia. Known for crafting intense and atmospheric storytelling, Dalia approaches the material with a focus on realism and tension. Instead of portraying crime in a stylized or glamorous way, the series emphasizes the gritty reality of investigative work. Surveillance operations unfold slowly, suspects slip through narrow windows of opportunity, and the police must constantly adapt to new information. Dalia's direction reinforces the idea that crime investigations are rarely clean or straightforward. They involve dead ends, miscalculations, and the constant pressure of knowing that criminals may strike again before the case is solved. Yet every crime leaves behind a trail, and this is where the investigators begin to gain ground. DNA evidence recovered from one of the crime scenes becomes the first thread in a complex web of connections. At first, the evidence appears insignificant, just a small trace that might not even lead anywhere. But as forensic teams analyze the material and compare it with existing databases, patterns begin to emerge. One suspect leads to another, and gradually the investigators uncover an entire network of individuals involved in planning, financing, and executing the robberies. What initially seemed like isolated incidents slowly reveals itself as a coordinated criminal enterprise spanning multiple cities and even crossing international borders. As the investigation progresses, the story begins to explore the human dimension of both sides of the conflict. On one side are the federal officers who sacrifice personal stability in pursuit of justice. Their work requires long periods away from family, constant secrecy, and the willingness to face danger without hesitation. On the other side are the criminals themselves, individuals driven by ambition, greed, or sometimes desperation. The series does not attempt to excuse their actions, but it does examine the circumstances that draw people into such organizations. By presenting these characters as complex individuals rather than one-dimensional villains, the narrative gains a deeper emotional resonance. One of the most compelling aspects of the story is the strategic battle between investigators and criminals. Every move made by the police forces the criminals to adjust their tactics, and every adaptation by the criminals creates new challenges for law enforcement. Surveillance operations are carefully planned, with officers monitoring suspects for weeks or even months before making a move. Meanwhile, the criminal network constantly shifts its operations to avoid detection, using coded communication and cross-border logistics to stay one step ahead. This strategic chess match forms the backbone of the series, turning each episode into a tense contest of intelligence and patience. The geographical setting adds another layer of complexity to the narrative. The border region between Brazil and Paraguay becomes almost like a character itself. It is a place where cultures intersect, laws differ, and criminals can exploit jurisdictional boundaries to their advantage. Smugglers, traffickers, and organized gangs all operate within this environment, creating a landscape where legality and illegality often blur together. For the federal police, operating in this region requires not only investigative skill, but also diplomatic coordination and logistical planning. Crossing the border in pursuit of suspects involves navigating legal frameworks that can slow down even the most urgent operations. As the investigators close in on the leaders of the robbery network, the tension escalates dramatically. What began as a forensic investigation gradually transforms into a series of high-risk field operations. Armed raids, undercover missions, and surveillance stings become necessary steps to gather the evidence needed for arrests. The criminals, aware that the net is tightening around them, become increasingly desperate and unpredictable. Some attempt to flee the country, while others prepare for violent confrontations with the authorities. Each encounter carries the risk of escalating into deadly conflict. Amid the action and suspense, the story never loses sight of the broader themes driving its narrative. One of these themes is the evolving nature of crime in the modern world. Criminal organizations are no longer isolated gangs operating within a single city. They function more like corporations, with hierarchies, logistical chains, and financial strategies that span entire regions. To confront such threats, law enforcement must adopt equally sophisticated methods. The use of DNA evidence within the series symbolizes this transformation, illustrating how science and technology have become essential tools in the fight against organized crime. Another recurring theme is the psychological burden carried by those who fight on the front lines of justice. The investigators portrayed in the series are not invincible heroes. They're people who experience doubt, exhaustion, and fear. The constant pressure of chasing dangerous criminals can strain relationships and test personal limits. Yet it is precisely this vulnerability that makes their determination so compelling. They continue their work not because it is easy, but because they understand the consequences of failure. Throughout the narrative, the pacing gradually builds toward the inevitable confrontation between the investigators and the leaders of the robbery network. Each discovery brings them closer to identifying the masterminds behind the crimes. But the deeper they dig, the more they realize that the organization is larger and more complex than they initially believed. Financial backers, logistical coordinators, and international contacts all play roles in sustaining the operation. Taking down the network will require more than simply arresting a few gunmen. It will demand a coordinated effort to dismantle the entire structure. The release of the series on Netflix marked a significant moment for Brazilian television drama. By presenting a story rooted in real criminal investigations while maintaining the scale and intensity of a cinematic thriller, the show demonstrates how global streaming platforms are expanding the reach of regional storytelling. Audiences around the world are given a glimpse into the realities of crime and law enforcement in South America, experiencing a narrative that feels both locally grounded and universally engaging. As the story unfolds, the investigators face setbacks that test their resolve. Leads disappear, suspects escape, and evidence sometimes proves insufficient to secure arrests. Yet every failure also provides new information, gradually shaping a clearer picture of the criminal organization's structure. Patience becomes the investigator's greatest weapon. Rather than rushing into reckless confrontations, they build their case piece by piece, waiting for the moment when the evidence is strong enough to bring the entire network down. Eventually, the investigation reaches a point where action can no longer be delayed. Armed with months of surveillance data, forensic analysis, and intelligence reports, the federal police prepare for a coordinated operation aimed at capturing the leaders of the robbery gang. The planning phase is meticulous. Teams are assigned specific targets, communication protocols are established, and contingency plans are prepared in case the suspects attempt to resist or flee. The success of the entire mission depends on timing and coordination. When the operation finally unfolds, it represents the culmination of everything the investigators have sacrificed throughout the story. The tension that has been building since the first episode reaches its peak as officers move in on multiple locations simultaneously. The criminals, once confident in their ability to evade capture, suddenly find themselves surrounded by the very forces they had underestimated. In these moments, the series captures the raw intensity of law enforcement operations, the noise, the confusion, and the split-second decisions that determine whether justice will prevail. Even as the immediate conflict concludes, the story leaves viewers reflecting on the broader implications of the investigation. Organized crime may lose one network, but the conditions that allow such operations to exist remain. The fight between law enforcement and criminal organizations is not a single battle, but an ongoing struggle. Each victory represents progress, yet the need for vigilance never disappears. Through its layered storytelling, complex characters, and realistic portrayal of modern investigative techniques, the series offers more than just an action-packed crime drama. It becomes a portrait of persistence in the face of overwhelming challenges. The federal police officers at the center of the narrative understand that their mission may never truly end. Yet, they continue their work with the belief that every criminal network dismantled brings society one step closer to safety. In the end, the story of criminal code stands as a testament to the evolving nature of justice in a world where crime has become more organized, more technologically advanced, and more international than ever before. By focusing on the intersection of forensic science, determined investigators, and a dangerous criminal underworld operating across borders, the series delivers a gripping narrative that captures both the thrill of the chase and the human cost behind it. It is a story about persistence, intelligence, and the relentless pursuit of truth, reminding audiences that even in the darkest corners of the criminal world, the search for justice continues.